What drives a being to travel across galaxies? Not for survival, but for the thrill of the hunt. The predator doesn't strike out of hunger or desperation. It hunts for sport, for honor, for a twisted sense of glory. But when does a sacred tradition cross the line into something far darker? Tonight, we dive into the mind of the ultimate hunter and ask, is this cosmic warrior a noble guardian of ancient ways, or something far more sinister hiding behind a code of honor? Long before humans walked the earth, on a distant world shrouded in mystery, an entire civilization built itself around a single concept: the hunt. The Yautja, as they call themselves, didn't develop this way by accident. Their society emerged from a planet where only the strongest, the most cunning, the most disciplined could survive. But here's where it gets fascinating from a psychological perspective. Unlike human societies that evolved from cooperation and community building, predator culture seems to have developed from pure competition. Every aspect of their existence revolves around proving worthiness through combat, through the successful tracking and elimination of dangerous prey. Think about what this does to a developing mind. From childhood, a predator is taught that value comes not from creation, compassion, or collaboration, but from the ability to hunt and eliminate. Their entire sense of self-worth is tied to their prowess as hunters. It's not unlike certain human cultures throughout history, where warrior status determines social hierarchy, but taken to an extreme. The psychological framework here is crucial. We're looking at beings who have weaponized honor itself. Their code isn't just about rules of engagement. It is about maintaining a sense of moral superiority, while engaging in what would otherwise be considered psychopathic behavior. They've created an elaborate justification system that allows them to pursue their darkest impulses while feeling righteous about it. The technology, the rituals, the sacred weapons, all of it serves to elevate what is essentially systematic hunting of sentient beings into something that feels noble and meaningful. But there was something lurking beneath this carefully constructed honor system that nobody could have predicted. Here's where the psychology gets truly disturbing. What began as cultural tradition slowly transformed into something far more dangerous: addiction. Yes, addiction, because that's exactly what we're witnessing when we observe predator behavior patterns. Consider the neurochemical responses involved in hunting. The planning phase triggers dopamine release, the anticipation of reward. The stalking phase floods the system with adrenaline and norepinephrine. The actual confrontation creates an intense cocktail of stress hormones and endorphins. For humans, these chemical responses helped us survive. But for predators, they became the foundation of their entire existence. The first rupture in their honor system came when the traditional prey on their homeworld was no longer sufficient. Like any addict, they needed stronger stimuli to achieve the same neurochemical high. This is where the expansion began, traveling to other worlds, seeking more challenging prey, pushing boundaries further and further. But here's the truly unsettling part. They maintained their honor code throughout this escalation. They convinced themselves that seeking more dangerous prey was actually more honorable, more worthy. It is a classic example of rationalization, a psychological defense mechanism, where harmful behavior is justified through seemingly logical reasoning. The younger predators started taking unnecessary risks, breaking traditional protocols, all in pursuit of that neurochemical rush. The elders watched as their sacred traditions slowly warped into something unrecognizable. The hunt was no longer about proving worthiness. It was about feeding an insatiable need for stimulation. And this is where we see the first signs of what psychologists would recognize as antisocial personality traits emerging. The inability to form genuine emotional connections, the lack of empathy for their prey, the grandiose sense of self-importance, all masked behind a veneer of ancient tradition and honor. But the real transformation was just beginning. As generations passed, something frightening happened to the predator psyche. What started as cultural hunting practices evolved into a sophisticated system of rationalized violence. They didn't just become more efficient hunters. They became psychological architects of their own moral blindness. The most chilling aspect isn't their technology or their physical prowess. It is how methodically they've structured their thinking to eliminate any trace of guilt or moral questioning. They've created elaborate rituals around their hunts, turning each act of violence into a sacred ceremony. This isn't accidental. It's a psychological defense mechanism called moral disengagement. Through their honor codes and traditions, they've essentially programmed themselves to view sentient beings as nothing more than obstacles to overcome, trophies to collect. The marking of foreheads, the collection of spines, the ritualistic preparation, all of these serve to dehumanize their targets and transform acts of extreme violence into religious experiences. What's particularly disturbing is how they've weaponized the concept of worthiness. A predator doesn't see an innocent person going about their daily life. They see a potential challenge, a test of their abilities. This cognitive restructuring allows them to completely bypass normal empathetic responses that would prevent most beings from harming others. From a neuropsychological standpoint, we're looking at beings who have essentially trained themselves to suppress mirror neuron responses, the neural pathways responsible for empathy and understanding others' emotions. Instead, they've heightened their predatory instincts while maintaining just enough self-awareness to feel superior about their discipline and honor. The scariest part? They genuinely believe they're the good guys in this scenario. They've constructed an entire worldview where they're cosmic guardians of some universal order, where their violence serves a greater purpose. It's a level of self-deception that rivals the most dangerous human psychological profiles we've studied. But the true monster lurking within the system was still waiting to fully emerge. There comes a moment in every predator's journey where they cross an invisible line, a point where honor becomes hollow justification, where tradition becomes pathological obsession. This is where we witness the complete moral transformation from warrior to something far more sinister. The turning point often comes during their first blooding ceremony, the ritual hunt that marks their transition from youth to adult. But here's what makes this particularly disturbing from a psychological perspective. By this point, they've been so thoroughly conditioned that crossing moral boundaries feels not just acceptable, but necessary for their identity. Watch how they rationalize their actions. A true warrior, they tell themselves, doesn't hesitate. A true hunter doesn't feel remorse. They've created a psychological framework where normal emotional responses, guilt, empathy, moral questioning, are seen as weaknesses to be overcome rather than essential human qualities to be preserved. This is where we see the emergence of what psychologists call malignant narcissism. They don't just believe they're superior to their prey. They believe they have the right, even the obligation, to decide who lives and who becomes a trophy. The universe, in their minds, exists to provide them with challenges worthy of their skills. The most chilling aspect is how they've turned the concept of fair play into another tool of psychological manipulation. They give their prey weapons, they announce their presence. They follow certain rules, not out of genuine respect, but because it makes the hunt more satisfying. It's not honor. It's psychological sadism dressed up in the language of tradition. And here's the question that should terrify us. What if they're right? What if the universe really is just a hunting ground where the strong take what they want from the weak? What if our concepts of morality and ethics are just evolutionary accidents that hold us back from embracing our true nature? When a predator looks at us, they don't see fellow sentient beings deserving of respect. They see either worthy prey or disappointing failures. At what point does the hunter become the very monster they claim to be testing themselves against? Here is where everything becomes terrifyingly clear. The predator's behavior isn't random violence or primitive savagery. It is a sophisticated psychological system that has been refined over millennia to create the perfect hunting machine while maintaining the illusion of moral superiority. From a neuroscientific perspective, we're looking at beings who have essentially rewired their brains for predation. Their dopamine reward pathways have been conditioned to respond most strongly to the successful tracking and elimination of intelligent prey. It's not unlike how certain human serial offenders develop escalating patterns of behavior, but taken to a species-wide level. The honor code serves multiple psychological functions. First, it provides structure and ritual that helps them dissociate from the reality of what they're doing. Second, it creates in-group bonding and social hierarchy. Third, and most importantly, it allows them to maintain a positive self-image while engaging in objectively harmful behavior. Studies of human antisocial behavior show us that the most dangerous individuals are those who recognize they read doing wrong. They read the ones who have constructed elaborate justification systems that make them feel righteous about their actions. The predators have perfected this on a civilization-wide scale. Their technology reflects this psychological framework. The biomasks that hide their faces don't just provide tactical advantages. They create psychological distance from their prey. The cloaking devices allow them to observe without being seen, feeding their sense of superiority and control. Even their weapons are designed to make the hunt feel more like a sacred ritual than what it actually is. But here's the most disturbing part. Their system works. They've created a sustainable psychological framework that allows them to pursue their violent impulses indefinitely while feeling good about themselves. They've solved the problem that limits most predatory behavior. They've eliminated guilt, doubt, and moral questioning from the equation. It wasn't madness driving their actions. It was cold, calculated psychological engineering perfected over generations of practice. So what remains after the predator's ship disappears into the stars? What legacy does this cosmic hunter leave behind beyond the devastation and trauma of their passage? The most haunting aspect isn't the physical destruction. It's the psychological impact on the survivors. Those who witness a predator hunt and live to tell about it are forever changed. They've seen proof that somewhere in the universe, there are beings so advanced, so capable, that human concepts of safety and security become meaningless jokes. But there is a deeper philosophical question here that cuts to the core of what it means to be a conscious, moral being. The predators force us to confront uncomfortable truths about the nature of power, hierarchy, and survival. They represent what we might become if we stripped away empathy, compassion, and moral reasoning in favor of pure efficiency and self-interest. Their civilization serves as a dark mirror for our own. How many of our own cultural traditions, when examined closely, serve to justify behavior that might otherwise be considered questionable? How many of our heroes throughout history were really just sophisticated predators who happened to win? The predators have achieved something that many would consider the ultimate evolutionary success. They've eliminated weakness, doubt, and moral limitation from their species. They've created beings who are perfectly adapted for domination, who feel no conflict about their place in the universe, who never question whether their actions are right or wrong. And yet, watching them in action, we can't help but feel that they've lost something essential, something that makes existence meaningful beyond mere survival and dominance. They've traded their souls for perfection, their humanity for power. Perhaps the most terrifying realization is that they might not be the last. Somewhere in the cosmos, there might be other civilizations facing the same choice: evolve beyond morality or risk being hunted by those who already have. The cycle continues, the hunt never ends, and the universe remains a dangerous place where honor can be twisted into justification for almost anything. In the end, the predator forces us to confront a fundamental question about the nature of consciousness and morality. Are ethical principles universal truths, or just evolutionary accidents that handicap us in a hostile universe? When we strip away all justifications and traditions, what separates the hunter from the monster? Perhaps the most disturbing answer is this: the monster never believes it's the monster. It always believes it's the hero of its own story, following its own perfect code of honor.